Good evening and welcome to the January 28th, 2025 meeting of the Portsmouth Zoning Board of Adjustment. Welcome. We are in order. Let me just remind people that petitioners, applicants have 15 minutes to do their presentation. If they should need more, if they think they're going to need more ahead of time, please let us know before that and we will vote on it. Anybody speaking to, for, or against will have 5 minutes. Okay. The new item of business, first item of new business is the request of Michelle Catherine Arbor and Jeffrey M. Matson, owners, for property located at 86 Emery Street, whereas relief is needed to construct a firewood shed which requires the following. 1. Variance from section 10.571 to allow an accessory structure to be located closer to the street than the primary structure. Said property is located on Assessor Map 220, Lot 87-1, and lies within the Single Residence B district. Jeffrey Matson is one of our own. He is recused from voting on this item. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Yes, Jeff Matson, 86 Emery Street.
Excuse me, therefore Jody will be voting. I'm sorry.
So the application is to build a firewood shed. And if we can see from the site plan, the need for the variance is because it's closer to Myrtle Ave, which is a secondary frontage, and you're not allowed to have a secondary or an accessory building closer to the street than a principal building. I have to admit, I didn't design this firewood shed to withstand earthquakes, but I hope we'll be okay. So looking at the site plan, we can see it's a 15-foot long, proposed to be 15-foot long, 4-foot wide, 8-foot tall firewood shed. It'll be well, I'm asking for 5 feet from the side yard, but realistically I'll put it like 5.5 feet, and 5 feet is allowed by right. And then it's 75 feet back from the secondary front yard and 46 feet from the principal front yard, which is further back than the dwelling from Emery Street. And Emery Street is our driveway entrance and our address and what we would consider our frontage. You could go to the next slide. So yeah, I designed it 8 foot tall to the peak of this shed roof. Our calculations for structure heights, it would be to the midline actually, so it would be less. So it would be no more than 8 feet. But again, that's also allowed by right. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to show on the slide. Go to the next one. So I have A, B, and C images of the proposed location, some photographs, and the A, B, and C is listed on the site plan. So for this one, if we go back to A, you can see basically where the firewood shed would be. It's right next to the bluestone patio that we just recently built that has a fire pit in it. And we would also like to use the firewood shed to store the patio chairs in the winter. If you go to image photo B, this is looking at it from the street. This is the intersection of Myrtle and Emery, which are our two frontages. You can see it off to the left of the side of our dwelling. And again, it's set back 75 feet from the street, next to the fire pit shed. Actually, next to the fire pit patio. And then, yeah, the final image is image C. This is from Myrtle, and there's plenty of trees along the property line, and it's set back. But this just gives a good visual. And so with that, I'll go through the 5 criteria. We'll take the first 2 together. The variance is not contrary to the public interest, and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. The proposed use of a firewood shed does not conflict with the explicit or implicit purpose of the ordinance, and does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, threaten public health, safety, or welfare, or otherwise injure public rights. This accessory building satisfies all setbacks and size criteria and would be allowed by right if there was a side yard rather than a secondary front yard. And we all know that corner lots always have these issues with the 2 frontages. So for substantial justice is done, the benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by harm to the general public or to other individuals. There is no harm to the general public, and the only individuals affected are the side yard abutters. However, the 8-foot-tall firewood shed will serve as a continuation of the existing side yard cedar fence and provides privacy for the butter as well as for us. The base of the firewood shed is actually at a lower elevation than the abutter's driveway, so the top will not be much higher than eye level to preserve light and air. And then next, the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. Building a firewood shed next to a bluestone fire pit patio with cedar siding and a standing seam metal roof to match the principal building is an improvement and should not diminish the values of surrounding properties. And then finally, literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The property is burdened by the zoning restriction on accessory buildings closer to a street than a principal building in a manner that is distinct from other similarly situated property. First, the purpose of the zoning restriction in question is to have accessory buildings be secondary to the principal building. Because of the irregular shape of the property and being a corner lot, the restriction as applied to the property does not serve the purpose in a fair and substantial way. The secondary front yard functions as a side yard, and the accessory building will be 75 feet from the property line and only 8 feet at the tallest point. Finally, the proposed use of a firewood shed next to a fire pit patio is a reasonable use that does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone to speak against this petition? Is there anyone to speak to, for, or against this petition? Okay. Then the public hearing is closed. And what would we like to do? Yes, Mr. Neese.
This seems like a reasonable request. If you're ready for a motion, I'm ready to grant one.
I am ready for a motion.
I move to grant the variance for the application as presented and advertised.
We
Second.
have a second from Mr. Mantle.
Thank you. I'd like to preface my comments by pointing out the strange shape of this lot. And the secondary front yard is created by a very small part of the lot that abuts Myrtle Avenue. So I'll come back to that in the hardship conditions. Taking the first two criteria, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. This will not affect the health, safety, or welfare of the neighborhood. There will be no effect on light and air. As pointed out by the applicant, the structure being built is actually very low and complies with all requirements on height. There's no evidence that it'll affect light and air or health, safety, and welfare. The ordinance is designed, I think, in part to prevent clutter in front of a building. Even though this is a secondary front yard, it's not really in front of the building. It's on the side of the building. I can't see any benefit to the public by denial of this, and the applicant would have a arguably less useful fire pit if it's denied. So granting the variance would do substantial justice. There's no evidence that there will be any effect on property values. It's a small structure for storage of firewood. It's not going to affect anything. It's on a fairly large lot. Moving on to the hardship criteria, excuse me. As I pointed out, the special conditions of the lot is unusually shaped, very short frontage along the street, technically giving it a secondary front yard. The main building is close to 100 feet approximately from this street. The proposed structure is 75 feet away and is on the side of the building. This thing is going to be almost unnoticeable from Myrtle Street. Because of these special conditions of the property, the size of the building, there does not appear to be any fair or substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance as it's specifically applied to this property and this request.
Thank you. Does the second have anything to add?
No, it was very well stated.
Is there any discussion before we vote? Okay. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Rayum?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You have your shed. Okay.
Good, now I can go home.
So the next item of business is the request of 909 West End LLC owner. Sorry. For property located at 909 Islington Street, whereas relief is needed to allow a restaurant which requires the following. 1, special exception from section 10.440, use number 9.42 to allow a restaurant with an occupant load from 50 to 250 people, where it is allowed by special exception. Said property is located on Assessor Map 172, Lot 7, and lies within the Character District 4W. Jody is recused, for the record. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Yes,
You're welcome.
thank you. My name is Megan Boland. I'm here with Chinburg Builders as a owner representative for 909 West End LLC. And I can run through the special exemption criteria, if that is how we should start.
We would like you to do the criteria, but if you want to tell us more about the project.
Sure. So we have a tenant for a 3,000 square foot vacant space in the building. I do have some attachments. I'm not sure if they're available. So I've
We can
included.
show you.
My mistake. Okay. Some existing exterior elevations and proposed elevations for the restaurant.
Which detail would you like?
I guess we can just start at the beginning, the first page here. So that's an interior shot. This is the existing exterior of the building with the proposed rendering for the restaurant. And I think there's a couple of those. So the special exemption criteria that we are speaking to would be any hazards to the public. We don't believe it will cause any hazards to the public or adjacent property on account of potential fire, explosion, or release of toxic materials. We don't believe it will deter the property values in the vicinity or change in the essential characteristics of any area. And we don't believe it will create a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the traffic congestion in the vicinity.
Okay. Other questions for the applicant?
Usually do.
Yes.
So the occupancy load on this restaurant is going to be 127 people?
Correct.
Okay. And does that include the outdoor seating?
The outdoor seating is developing, and so this parking map here was superseded, and I shared the updated parking map with Stephanie. We had the civil engineer put together an existing condition map there it is. So this shows the existing parking spaces available on the parcel. There's 115 spaces.
Okay, but is does the occupancy load include the outdoor seating?
Or only the-
It does not at this stage, Evan.
Would you mind if I help
tell
answer
us
that
who
question?
you are, and
Sure,
then you can-
of course. My name is Evan Mullen, Principal Architect at Portland Architects, and I am here on behalf of the tenant, my client. So the proposed outdoor seating right now is mostly conceptual. We have not broached that topic with the city yet, but we plan to in the future. So the first step was to get this special exception approved so that we could continue with the permitting process. So the 119 occupants were calculated for the interior space with 8 for the outside.
Right, for the outside, okay.
Thank you.
So I guess a question for the staff, why does it need to be further developed? Is this part of the outdoor dining or?
Outdoor dining would be a conditional use permit, I believe, in this, this district. That's not something I was totally prepared to talk about. You're asking the hard questions tonight.
That probably should have been excluded from the civil plan. It's, like Evan said, very conceptual at this stage. And the engineer dropped it onto this plan. But it's not finalized by any
Gotcha.
means, and we'll address any necessary permitting for that.
I wanted to make sure that, the impetus for this hearing was our building permit submission. So we wanted to indicate on the life safety plan, most importantly, the potential number of occupants on the higher end that we could accommodate with the space and the means of egress and the plumbing fixtures in the building. So that's why we had it on our plan for life safety for the building permit, and that's how it landed here on the site plan.
Yes,
So just to follow up, because the special exception is allowed for occupancy load between 50 and 250, so it can't go over 250. So I just wanted to see if we had the full total occupancy load to make sure it fits within those standards of 50 to 250.
but David is looking askance. No, you're askance, I never have.
So it sounds like the proposed occupant load falls within that range, which is why they're here for the special exception, but they can be anywhere in between that.
Okay, all right. No, okay, I understand that. I was just wondering how much they had planned on the exterior, that's all.
Understood.
I know they're not close to the 250, but,
Other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Okay, what would we like to do?
oh, we have to hear from the public.
I'm sorry. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? 2, 4, or against? Okay, the public hearing is closed. I was having technical difficulties. What would we like to do?
Madam Chair, I move that we grant the requested special exception as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
I think it's pretty straightforward in terms of the proposed use here, so I'll just go through the criteria. Our first is that the standards as provided by the ordinance for the particular use are permitted by special exception. That is the case. That is one of the allowed.
Is that Jody back? Oh, no, we don't. I'm sorry, David. I'm really sorry.
It is one of the, it is an allowed special exception for Character District 4W. The applicant has demonstrated that their internal and likely even any sort of external occupant load would be within the 50 to 250 person limit of this particular special exception. No hazard to the public or adjacent property on account of potential fire, explosion, or release of toxic materials. There's nothing about the restaurant use in particular, and especially in this sort of quasi-industrial commercial zone that would present any unusual hazard to the public related to any of those concerns. No detriment to property values in the vicinity or change in the essential characteristics of any area, including residential neighborhoods or business and industrial districts. So, and again, this would be due to structures, parking areas, access ways, odor, smoke, gas, dust, or other pollutants, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or unsightly odor, outdoor storage of equipment, vehicles, or other materials. So there's nothing that's been presented here that would indicate that any of that is a concern for this particular use. The vast majority of the restaurant use will be internal to the relatively modest space that it will be occupying. Really, this whole district is a combination of residential uses, commercial uses, some light industrial type uses that are spread across the whole area. It really just sort of reflects that pattern that is seen throughout this old industrial area that's been converted into this more suburban type use. Next is no creation of a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. Again, the applicant, there's been numerous businesses in the area before and since. There's nothing to believe that this particular use as a restaurant will be significantly more intensive than other potential uses in the area that would result in an unusual amount of traffic. It is an area that sees a decent amount of traffic, both some residential and then, again, for the many commercial and light industrial and artist properties that are located here. So, again, I think it is well within keeping for that criteria. No excessive demand on municipal services, including but not limited to water, sewer, waste disposal, police, and fire protection, and schools. Again, this is a restaurant use. It will need some of those, but again, a restaurant use is not particularly excessive demands of any of those particular services. It's fairly routine of what you would expect for any type of commercial endeavor in these areas. And lastly, no significant increase of stormwater runoff onto adjacent property or streets. This is basically already built out, long since built out property. It's no new construction. The use in and of itself, it's in a highly paved area, so it really doesn't change the characteristic. There's no impervious surface that's being made pervious here. So with that, I believe this met all the criteria for the special exception and should be granted.
Does the second have anything to add?
I just add that surrounding the outside of this structure is still all part of this parcel and private property, which is all set back quite a ways from the actual public right of way. So that's a benefit for them. And just that a restaurant in this building would be a nice addition to the West End.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion before we vote? Okay, then we will vote. Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Rayom?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You may have your restaurant. Okay. All right. The next item of business, new business C, the request of Gary B. Dodds Revocable Trust, owner, for property located at 294 Lincoln Avenue, whereas relief is needed to demolish the two existing detached garages and construct a new attached garage, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow 28% building coverage where 25% is the maximum allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 130, Lot 24, and lies within the General Residence A District. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Yes, I would. Good evening, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. Let me just run, I guess, through
Excuse me, please, could you tell us your name and
Oh, I'm
address?
sorry. I'm Gary, and my last name is Dodds.
Okay.
I reside at the place. Looking at the the site survey here. One second. What I have in the lower right-hand corner, it's marked in red. That is the old garage that needs to be demolished, taken down. It's quite small. It has fallen into disrepair, and it has a dirt floor all throughout. It doesn't have a foundation. It doesn't have electricity. It physically is not stable, and unfortunately, its functional space is not up to standards for today's garages, anyway. And the other red square that you see was something that I put up temporary, hoping that I get this approval and I can move on to the planning process, was to store what's in that garage into the new interim storage facility. Both of those would be removed when the project is done. Obviously, the first one's going to be, the old garage would be taken down before the project was even started because it's right in the way. Some of the interesting characteristics of the lot itself, as you can see, the lot line runs almost all the way through the sidewalk, which it's not a big deal, but unfortunately the parallel line on the bottom of the of the property runs exactly the same way, which cuts across the neighbor's driveway, which I've given an easement because obviously he needs to use his driveway. So, having said that, it gives us a little challenge in where the actual garage can be placed. The other characteristic, which is unique to it, it's viewed from two different angles from the public, Lincoln and Miller. So you got to satisfy both, parties or neighbors on both sides, which I think we've done a pretty good job doing that. Obviously, these are conceptual drawings, but this is the best layout. This is probably the only layout that can actually work because of the way that you have to turn and maneuver through the lot. Let's see here. Currently, right now, the old garage, bottom right-hand corner, is 5.5 roughly from the property line from the abutting neighbor. What we're going to do is we're going to obviously demo that, and you get the whole 20 feet setback. So I think that's a benefit for that particular neighbor on that side. And what we're asking for is the lot coverage of 28%, where 25% is permitted. So that's basically the design that we have before you. And now I'll just run through some of these criteria that we need to meet for you to vote on the variance. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Yes, the new structure would be totally within the building envelope, and which makes it also within all of the setbacks. Giving that, it would also create more light, fresh air, and obviously space between the adjacent property at 260 Miller Ave, enhancing the overall appearance from the roadway of Miller Ave. Because if you look at it, it looks like the garage is part of his house, not part of my building. So, and then from Lincoln Ave, the perspective, it's a 3-bay garage looking at it from, like I said, from Lincoln Ave. The garage is primarily hidden by the house. So all you, most visibly you would see is the 3-bay garage anyway on that, and which, given the overall look and the appearance of it, it should increase the property values in the surrounding buildings on Lincoln Ave as well as Miller Ave, and I would say it would be the same thing for the neighborhood. Granting the variance would observe the spirit and ordinance. I would say yes, the proposed new garage would be set back 28 feet from the sidewalk, which currently, looking at the older garage, it's only 14.5 feet from the sidewalk on Miller Ave side. So we push it back that way. This alleviates any issues with backing out into the street. That was one of the comments that I needed to make tonight on that particular thing, so that the public or anybody using the garage would not back out into the street. They do a 2-point turn right there. So, creating more space with a sidewalk, it creates a greater public safety and welfare for all the people who are walking up and down the street without worrying about cars, coming right out of the garage and immediately having to turn into the street. The architectural design and the placement of the garage attached to the house also enhances the appearance of both of that structure, because now it looks like it's part of that building, and when it's done, and hopefully it's going to look like it never was ever changed, like it was always like that from the beginning. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. I would say yes, the surrounding neighbors and the property value should increase. It meets all the setbacks, as I've outlined before, having the building in the building envelope, creating a greater curb appeal. It also, with the placement of that structure, the view from both streets is enhanced greatly. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties. I would say yes, with the architectural design, it fits the character of the neighborhood. It would enhance the overall appearance from Lincoln, as well as Miller Ave. It allows more space between the house lots, especially on Miller Ave. Removing the outdated garage and building a new structure attached to the house, like I've said, meets all these setback requirements, and it's in the building envelope, but it also enhances the neighborhood and increases the property values and its overall, I think, harmonious charm with that particular neighborhood. Little enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. I would say yes, there would be no public loss or public interest granted in not granting the variance. The city receives a new structure. It's safer. It meets all the requirements. The garage meets all those setbacks that I've already talked about, and we're only asking for a 3% density. The abutting neighbor gains more surrounding space between the house, aesthetically appealing. It gives you more light, fresh air. The impact on the neighborhood is zero, I would say. I would say it would be an enhancement because that garage is not in good shape. It doesn't look pretty either. And I think it fits in well with the character of the neighborhood. The new structure would lessen the lights, especially projected on 260 Miller, because now you've got the garages blocking that particular thing. So I don't see any negative impact on the neighborhood. It enhances the overall look, the health, the safety, the welfare of the neighborhood. Especially with the garage attached to the house, it looks like it's more part of that particular lot, not part of someone else's. And then lastly, the public views it from two different angles, which I think we've done a pretty good job with balancing the neighbors' concerns as well as, things that I would want to accomplish on the lot. Given that the lot lines are not parallel with the lot, with the actual building, it created more of an issue with how we were going to lay that out on the project. And I believe there were 2, maybe 3 letters that were submitted from neighbors who were not opposed to the project. So I think that's a testament that Rita was, I believe, one of them. Dave Hudlin, I don't know if he's here or not. He might have submitted one, and then Ashelman, like straight across over on Lincoln Ave. So with that said, I believe I've taken up enough time, and if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Yes.
Unless somebody wants to go first, I went first.
Sorry, sir. No, thanks.
So you had referenced it in your presentation, and it's note 10 on your site plan. It's there it was noted that a variance was required from section 10.1114.32 small b to allow vehicles to exit parking by backing into or from a public street. So you represented that on the 4th garage bay, those folks will back out into that little turnaround there and then go out onto the street front?
Yeah, would drive out. They won't back out into the street. That's one of the site committee will, I can almost guarantee that they're not going to want to see anybody backing out on Miller Ave. Okay. So I think that was one of the reasons why we pushed everything forward, and we gained, it's almost 24 feet or 23 feet. It's 28 feet before the sidewalk. Right now, it's only 14.5 with the smaller garage. With the bigger garage, you've got that turn where you can make that swing and then swing out and either go in either direction. So I think that that concern is hopefully alleviated.
I have a few more follow-ups if I can.
Yes, you may.
So this is not just a garage. You have office space.
Office space
on the
above
top,
on the second
and
floor,
then
that's
you
correct.
have storage space. This is a whole new structure that encompasses more than just the replacement of the garage.
Correct.
So my question to you is that what is the office space? Who is going to be using the office space?
Me,
Okay,
I
do you
will be.
live there?
I do.
Okay, because it has your address as, well, the trust is on Sagamore Road
Yeah,
in Rye.
that's, I know that's an error. It needs to be fixed. That's not correct. I live there.
Okay, and so it's a three-family apartment building.
That's correct.
And what will be, so the three garages will be accessed off of, the smaller ones, 1, 2, and 3 will be accessed off of Lincoln Avenue, correct?
That's correct.
And then this other one, which is much larger, will be accessed off of Miller Avenue with the turnaround that you talked about. We don't really have a detail on why is the fourth garage so much larger than the other garages?
Because the major, you cannot access the garage, for one, inside the house. Right next to the house is a staircase that goes right up, right along, if you want me to walk over there?
Yes, but don't touch the screen, please.
And you'll need to come back or take the
And for-
microphone with
for
you.
microphone.
That picture shows exactly how that garage is laid out. Basically, you have the stairs entering the building from that side. That's the part that's attached to the house.
So you need.
So that's one reason why it's bigger. The other reason why it's bigger is because the office area above it. That's the biggest area that I could get, in one little spot, to have the office on the very top. The rest of it is just storage on the other side. There's only one bathroom. It's not for living space. It's just for an office.
So, and just one follow-up question, if I might, Madam
Sure.
Chair. So the, not you, her. So the office space is of a certain square foot that it could be converted to an ADU down the line because it's less than 600 square feet.
I don't think you can, because I already have 3 apartments in the building. I'm almost positive you can't do that.
ADUs are not allowed
With apartment buildings.
with, multifamily buildings.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I-
there will be no ADU in that office
Correct.
space.
Otherwise than that, I'd be in deep
Okay.
trouble.
All right, that's it.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. The public hearing is closed.
We had one late hand.
The public hearing is not closed.
Can we just do a quick vote if you wanted to reopen the public hearing just for consistency?
Move to
Madam Chair.
reopen the public hearing.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay. We're reopened.
Okay. Erica Wygonick?
Hi, thanks for letting me speak, and thanks for the presentation. This is really helpful. I live just a couple houses down, and I think it's a great project. It seems like it has the potential to really clean up what has been it looks like his garage. He would like to fix that. I'm just curious. It does seem like this is really big. I was really surprised. We got the notification that said it was a 4-bay garage, and once these plans were online, I was surprised at how big it was, and so that it needed the variance for size. And I'm just curious why it's so big. And I guess the board member pointed out the 4th bay, which seems like it's like a double garage. So it's like 5 garage spaces. I'm just curious if there's room to learn more about why it's as big as it is, to make sense of why there's a hardship.
I don't know how to answer that question for you. You heard the information had to do with the office over the building. Do we want to,
Comments noted.
yeah, whatever was said prior to your talking to us is what we know. Okay? Okay, so now, if there's no other comments, the public hearing is closed.
Okay.
What would we like to do? Yes,
I'm just going to say, I am not going to be supporting this application. I think that this is not merely a garage, 4 garages, there's office space, there is storage space on top. I think it takes it out a little bit of the accessory use designation. Not really sure how the office relates to an accessory use to the principal use. I think it is, this is the general residence A, I think, and I know that it's to support multifamily dwellings and whatnot, but I think this garage, being that there's 4 bays and that there is the office space and the office space on top, it seems more like a complex and less than a residential use. I know that the only variance that they're asking for a relief from is minor. It's just the building coverage, which is only 3% over what is allowed. But I think when you take the project as a whole, as presented and advertised, I think that it will threaten the general character of the area. I took a ride around there and looked to see if there was anything else that had anything like this, and I don't see anything that has 4-car garages that are attached. I think it will definitely be seen from Lincoln and Miller. So that's what I'm doing. That's my thoughts on this. I just want to state that. I don't know if a motion is forthcoming, so.
anybody else comment? Yes, Mr. Van.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree that this is more than just a garage, and maybe it shouldn't have been presented that way. That's just sort of a description that I think was trying to capture the essence of what's going on here. That said, we have to compare this against what's being asked for in terms of relief. The applicant is asking for 3% over the total lot coverage requirement. When you work through the math, that's less than 300 square feet. So by right, the applicant could build the vast majority of what they're proposing. Really, it is in many ways an extension to the house. A home office use is quite common now, so creating a home office in an area, it's separated from the home, but it's still a use that many applicants come before us asking for. The rest is given as storage. It's really kind of set up as sort of like a railroad, what might have been termed a railroad apartment on that second floor, where really you have to go through the office to get to the first storage, to get to the second storage. Doesn't really lend itself to a residential use overall, and even if it were that the applicant in the future chose to, by special exception, the applicant would be allowed to make that into a residential space. However, they would have to come back before this board, as would be an intensification of the current three-unit use. 4 is allowed in this zone as a special exception, the current 3 being grandfathered in because the applicant has had it that way for a considerable period of time. So, in the sense, outdoor parking, the applicant's required to have 4 parking spots. They could be outdoor, or in this case, the applicant has decided to make them indoor. It creates a positive characteristic for rentals. One of them is much larger. I imagine that would be the one that the applicant is keeping for themselves for, again, perhaps additional storage. It really comes down to what is being asked for relief. There's no setback relief. There's no height relief. The applicant is allowed to do all of these things except for that additional 300 square feet. Portion of it is essentially a 1-story structure. 2-story might be, if the relief was like for the whole area and it was all 2-story, I would say that might be asking a bit much, but in the nature that, we could lop off maybe one of the garage units if we really felt that was necessary. you could save this 300 square feet and the applicant could build the rest of it. I just don't, I think in terms of what's being asked for relief, it should be allowed.
Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Neese.
I guess I'm looking for a little more clarity on the use of a home occupation, which is permitted in this area, I think, but does that apply to an office that's built separate from the home? That's my question.
For me?
I think so.
Sorry, Stephanie.
If he had decided to create, an address for his business out of there, that would be considered a home occupation. As of right now, it's conditioned space. What he's presented to the board has not constituted a home occupation. He could use that as rec space. Right now it's labeled as office. Oops. But he could put a TV and a couch in there and it would still be okay. So home occupation is a little bit different. I believe a tenant fit-up building permit would be required because there's a certain percentage of the main floor area that's required. That's not something I've brushed up on recently, but does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Anybody else or a motion?
Madam Chair, I would move to grant the requested variance as presented and advertised.
Okay, is there-
Second.
Okay, second from Mr. Mattson.
Point of order.
Yes.
Can I just ask that their stipulation be added to remove the note 10 for the site plan that says a variance is required for the backing out of the garage space? That wasn't advertised and the applicant has said that he doesn't intend to back out.
Yep, I'm amenable to the stipulation that was just described by staff.
Thank you.
I agree.
All right. So again, I kind of talked about it. Yeah, this is a pretty substantial addition to the property, but at the same point in time, the relief that's being asked for is similarly small. I think we've seen many other homes in this neighborhood and others around the city, but particularly this area where there have been gigantic additions that have been put onto them for multiple purposes and uses. This one is, centered around a garage use, and on the first floor, and does have some additional uses on the second. Again, an office is not a business. We have all kinds of applicants that come before us having offices. Home offices now are, I have a home office. That's where I pay most of my bills, and fun things like that. And do people work at home? Sure. Do we consider it a home occupation? No. There's not entertaining customers, doing those other sorts of things. There's no indication that that's a concern here either. So again, in light of the very small amount of relief that's being asked for, I will go through the criteria, first of which we usually combine the first two. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest, and granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. Again, overall, what we're trying to do with total lot coverage is to not put an excessive number of very large amounts of additional structure on it. Again, the applicant is allowed to have most of this. Really, we're talking about the additional 300-ish, less than 300 square feet, which the applicant does have like a one-story portion of the building that is being added on to. It's that section is relatively modest overall. And really, the applicant is taking advantage of this being a relatively large lot, and is keeping with all the setbacks. There's really no indication that, even with some of the the height associated with some of the main section of the garage, it is not going to unduly impact the neighboring properties for light and air. And really, garages, including attached garages, we've seen them in many of the existing homes and in some of the proposed changes to some existing properties. Next is granting the variance to do substantial justice. That's always our balancing test. Is there something that in the general public need outweighs the applicant's desire to get more out of the property, take more advantage of the allowed building, and just a little bit over that, providing sheltered parking, which is a desirable amenity that is looked for both renters and as homeowners. I don't think there's anything here with the nature of the relief that's being asked for that the general public has a greater benefit potentially than the applicant would. So I think that is met. Granting the variance does not diminish the values of surrounding properties, as the applicant has pointed out. There are two current garage structures, one very old and dilapidated, another that was really sort of intended to be a temporary construction. Those will be demolished and removed. The new one will look like a continuation of the existing house. It seems to be architecturally, well-designed, relevant, will be built with substance and care. So with that, I don't see that there's anything here that would diminish the value of the neighboring properties. And lastly is the commonly called hardship criteria, but it really says, why is the ordinance, the strict application of the ordinance not appropriate for this particular property? And again, I do think that the applicant has a somewhat larger lot that does give the lot more room on either side. Does have the fact that it had a sort of a continuous driveway around it, which sort of created the two curb cuts that the applicant has already taken advantage of, and then is sort of positioning the garages in a way, it's large enough that it is able to, get the back out, within the property. It has enough room in there to really allow for transit of vehicles in and out of the garage. It is with those characteristics. I think the, again, small amount of relief that's being asked for here is within the hardship criteria, and that the use is a reasonable one, that the garages are a very common amenity. The applicant is simply providing a garage spot for all of the required parking that the existing three-unit use calls for, and is also taking advantage of a little bit of the height to add in some useful workspace and storage space. So with that, I recommend approval.
Does the second have anything to add, Mr. Mattson?
Yes, I would just add that again, this is not a single-family home. It's a three-unit structure that's already existing on the property. So with that, it makes a lot more sense to have these multiple garage bays, and it's added desirability for living in New England winters for those different units, and it's clearly an improvement upon what is there.
Thank you. Is there further discussion before a vote? Okay. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
No.
Ms. Margerson?
No.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So you are approved.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. The request of Treadwell LLC owner for property located at 93 Pleasant Street, whereas relief is needed to permit the provision of required parking spaces to be located on a separate lot in the same ownership within 300 feet of the property line of the lot in question, which requires the following. 1, special exception from section 10.1113.112 to allow 5 of the required parking spaces to be located at 134 Pleasant Street, map 116, lot 30. Said property is located on Assessor Map 107, Lot 74, and lies within the Character District for Historic and Downtown Overlay Districts. Is there anyone to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is FX Bruton. I'm with Bruton and Barabee. I'm here on behalf of the applicant Treadwell LLC. Tonight with me is Marie Bodie, who is associated with the entity, the applicant, and Tracy Kozak is here as well. And Tracy is the project architect for the work that's being done at 93 Pleasant, which I will refer to as the Treadwell Mansion, which will be proposed as the Treadwell Inn. So it'll be a 40-unit inn. And in that application, the parking requirements, as I've outlined in my application, require 25 spaces to be provided, and in that situation, we have 20 on site. What your zoning ordinance allows is that if you have another parcel under common ownership within 300 feet, then you can utilize that parking, and what we would like to do is utilize the property where the Citizens Bank is currently located, right next door to the municipal parking lot, to provide for those spaces. That Citizens lot is currently quite underutilized. If you went there, you might see about half of the spaces being utilized. If you looked on the tax map, which is part of the application, and the aerial, you basically could see that pretty much half of those spaces, at least in front of the bank, are not utilized. And we would like to obviously add signage for the patrons of the hotel and put those spaces in that location right across from basically the front door, if you will, of the bank towards the closest to the road. There's actually 2 aisles there, so it's the one closest to the road. And we believe that obviously it's within the 300 feet, and it would satisfy the criteria to be able to do that. By the way, if you went there tonight, which I did, you'd see that only 6 spaces are being utilized as we speak. And basically, obviously, we're looking at this as a good space to utilize that extra parking, particularly in light of the fact that you have a financial institution which now largely is doing business almost exclusively through the drive-through with very little utilization of the parking lot. And then you have the other use that we put there in terms of the 5 spaces being a hotel use, more at-night parking type of arrangement. So it wasn't surprising for me to see 6 spaces being utilized now in that lot, and obviously there probably is none at night. There's no use of, well, I take that back. There's I think there's two apartments in that building as well. But in any event, the standard, I think we meet those standards. I'll go through them. The first one is that this would be allowed, and again, I described that your ordinance allows for us to utilize those 5 spaces as long as we're within the 300-foot radius, which we depicted that we are. The second criteria is whether there's a hazard to the public or adjacent properties in terms of fire, explosion, release of toxic materials. I mean, I think obviously we're not. Again, we're not creating anything. We're just utilizing those spaces that are currently not even being used right now. The third test is there any detriment to property values or any issues associated with odor, smoke, gas, dust, pollutants, noise, glare. Again, this is a relatively large parking lot. We're not creating anything new. We're just utilizing the 5 spaces there. So I think we meet that test as well. And are you creating any traffic safety hazards or increase in traffic congestion? We don't believe we are. It's, again, just utilizing the parking spaces that have been there for decades. And is there a demand on municipal services? Again, we don't see that there's any impact at all. It's a fairly de minimis use. And lastly, is there any increase in stormwater runoff? Again, we're not creating new development. We're just utilizing what's there. So we think we meet the criteria. Certainly available if you have any questions.
Yes, Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So trying to understand, our staff report has information about the parking requirements at the Treadwell Mansion property. Mm-hmm. And I know that you're making a claim that the Citizen Bank parking, there's plenty of it. However, it still comes down to what does our ordinance require. So do you know for that particular parcel, what is the parking requirement per the zoning ordinance, and what do you currently have for parking, i.e., do you have the extra 5 spaces to give up?
Right, we have, I know we have 33 spaces. The parcel was not developed by the current owner, but it was developed in, I think, 1998. So I'm not sure what the requirements were for the parking at that time. But we currently utilize 6 spaces that we have as signage for another use, and we know that we could certainly utilize those 6 spaces for the 5 that we're looking to put in there. But we do intend to put signage in there and have those as exclusive use for that use.
Okay, but you don't know, per the current ordinance, if you were to plop a bank down there today, what does the bank require for parking, and do you meet or hopefully exceed it by at least 5 spaces?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't. That's the simple answer, but that's because, again, we weren't looking to create that space. But Tracy will.
Zero commercial banks require 0 parking in the downtown.
Please say your name.
Tracy Kozak, Arc of Architects.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that, I guess, is that property in the downtown overlay district? Is that why?
It is in the downtown overlay district.
Let me double check that.
Is that why?
I know we're on the kind of on the fringes of the downtown overlay district. Anyway, we'll move on.
It's advertised as being in it.
Well, that's the property that the Treadwell mansion is on.
Okay.
I'll
Is the property
I
where
guess
the
I read that
Citizens
to read
Bank
134
on-
Pleasant. Okay.
Also part of the downtown
Okay.
overlay district.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the, so you say on, well, it's page 49, your page isn't numbered, it was page 49 of our package, to memorialize the use
yes.
of the 5 spaces
Yeah.
at 134 Pleasant Street property, a license agreement is proposed, and you provide a copy of one that's for a similar hotel over on Middle Street. I guess, first of all, do you know the example that you're giving us, that relationship between that particular hotel and a related property, was that done through granting of a special exception by this board? Or is it an agreement that is outside of that?
I think it was done at the planning board level, but it was done as part of that approval process. And there were common ownership there as well.
Okay.
I wasn't involved in that application, however.
Yeah, so I guess my fundamental concern is that our special exception is granted for the life of the property, right? It's now in perpetuity.
Right.
When we memorialize this relationship, how do we make sure it has a similar level of perpetuity? And how would a license agreement meet that, as opposed to, say, something like an easement?
We utilized the form that the city typically would use for that arrangement. That was approved, obviously, by the city legal department. That's just the way that they look at memorializing that. So we would, obviously, that's why we suggested using the exact document, using the same wording. It's already been approved, in essence, by the legal department in terms of how the city prefers to move forward with that. The issue of easements gets a little legally tricky in terms of, are you creating an easement in gross or an easement appurtenant? When they're not touching, it gets a little bit vague in that regard. So I think what the city likes to see is these documents, and that's exactly why we suggested it. One, again, because that's what the city's preference is. And that's exactly what was used in that other case. And it was a similar circumstance of just utilizing a different piece of property to have some overflow parking in that case.
Okay. And I guess just, if I may, with city staff, if you have any additional information on downtown overlay district or the legal department's views. I know you have the request for a stipulation about the legal department review, should this be granted.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't seen the staff memo, I did recommend a stipulation that to that effect, that the planning department and the legal department have final review on whatever agreement is drafted. And then I did look at our zoning map, and the Treadwell Mansion is in the downtown overlay. However, the Citizens Bank lot is not, just for the record.
So with that, because the zero parking requirement is related to downtown overlay district, do we believe?
I believe it is with respect to commercial properties. And again, Treadwell is got parking requirements because even in the downtown overlay, you require a certain, at the percentage that I outlined in my memo.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. That's all I have for questions. I guess I'd still appreciate an answer if we can get one on what we think the actual parking requirement is for Citizens Bank.
Mr. Neese, I think you've been waiting?
No,
No?
she answered the question.
Okay, good.
So my,
Ms. Marchison.
just a follow-up question, the parking lot license agreement that was provided as an example is registered. So that would, I think, sort of deal with some of the perpetuity issues. However, the only question I have is what if they fall out of, what if the two entities fall out of common ownership? Does that license agreement survive that event?
It's a good question. I presume it says successors and assigns, but I can certainly
see.
find that pretty quickly. And it is a recorded instrument in the registry, as you pointed out. Let's see if I have it here. I think I have it.
Because it's page 53 of our packet.
Yeah.
I don't see a successors and assigns on this. I would assume that the special exception would expire just because there's no more common ownership. So I think that the Treadwell Mansion would not be allowed to park, if we gave it approval, I don't think it would be able to park 5 cars there.
Yeah, well, I apologize. I thought I had it right with me, but I know I have it in my file, and I'll go over and look for it. Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, the answer is in the document. Article 5 grants the license permittees a non-revocable royalty-free license. So that, in essence, is going to capture Mr. Reum's concern about easement in a sense, because a license could be revocable, and this document is non-revocable. And so I think that
Does that
satisfies
satisfy
that.
the question?
It does. I think it may complicate the special exception upon which, like, say we granted it just because they're no longer a common ownership, but.
Yeah, and just, I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, I
No, that's
apologize.
fine.
But the rules that you have allow for it, and so if that was a concern, which apparently it wasn't to somehow define that perpetuity, then no one would ever be able to come to you, because that possibility is always going to be the case in every single case. But I think the fact that the way it was addressed was to utilize a document that called for perpetuity, in essence. So I think that's how they satisfied that concern.
Thank you. Are there further questions? Are we waiting for information before we proceed?
No pressure stuff.
So I did find, so this is in the CD, so the Citizens Bank is in the CD4 district. And under section 10.5A 44.21, we have a provision that says uses in the character districts and civic districts that are not located in the downtown overlay district shall provide off-street parking in accordance with section 10.1112. So I believe that is the typical parking requirement table. which it would be based on use.
Madam Chair, I'm fine if
You're fine with
we
this?
move on and staff continues to do their homework.
Okay,
Hopefully get some answer.
okay. I think, are there further questions for, okay, I think we're set.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. The public hearing is closed. And we can proceed while, yes, Ms. Margerson.
We're ready for a motion.
I am.
So I would move that we approve the special exception as presented and advertised. If I get a second, I'll speak to the
Is there a
criteria.
second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Metzen.
Okay. So going through our standards, section 1, 10.232.21, standards as provided by this ordinance for the particular use permitted by special exception, and Article 10.1113.112 permits the grant of a special exception for the provision of required parking on another lot in the same ownership in question and within 300 feet of the property line of the lot in question, as demonstrated above this. So the requirement is satisfied. This is exactly the section in our zoning ordinance that says the Board of Adjustment may grant a special exception when these circumstances are present. Treadwell LLC and Double Mick LLC are owned by the same entity. Number 2, 10.232.22, no hazard to the public or adjacent property on account of potential fire explosion or release of toxic materials. Here we have the provision of having 5 cars park in a lot across the street and the corner. There will be no potential fire explosion or release of toxic materials. 3, 10.232.23, no detriment to property values in the vicinity or change in the essential characteristics of any area, including residential neighborhoods or business and industrial districts, on account of the location or scale of buildings and other structures, parking areas, access ways, odor, smoke, gas, dust, or other pollutant, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or unsightly outdoor storage of equipment, vehicles, or other materials. This provision of having these 5 parking spaces at the citizen property does not touch on any of the areas here in this section. And then 4, 10.232.24, no creation of a traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. This is a very minor request. This is for 5 parking spots in an area that has a municipal parking lot, has significant traffic going around it. The movement of 5 cars in one day, or a little bit more than that, back and forth, does not really impinge on this. The people who park there will be walking to the hotel. And then 10.232.25, no excessive demand on municipal services, including but not limited to water, sewer, waste disposal, police, and fire protection in schools. There is no impact on municipal services. And no significant 10.232.26, no significant increase of stormwater runoff onto adjacent property or streets. There's nothing that about parking that will increase stormwater runoff. These parking lot is already built. I believe there's a stipulation that the planning department wants, which I will add with the approval of the second.
Yes.
The stipulation is final parking agreement to be submitted to the planning and legal departments for review and approval.
Does the second have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add, I'm really glad that our ordinance has this provision. I think, a lot of the most desirable parts of downtown were created before parking, and parking, a lot of what is desired would not be allowed now due to the parking requirements. So something like this is a great application of the ordinance.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to add, Mr. Neese?
Yeah, I am a little concerned about the issue that's been raised about whether we are exceeding the parking requirements for this other property where it is. And I know staff is trying to figure that out.
So I have pieces of it without floor plans and a parking inventory from the Citizens Bank lot, I can't give you a full answer. That is something the board has the right to request if they wish, but that's the best I can give you right now.
Yes, Mr. Van.
Yeah, looking at that issue, because I think it's 350 square feet for gross floor, one per 350 square feet of gross floor area. With the number of parking spaces, it's like a 10,000 square foot facility. I don't think we're probably in that region, but, I mean, I'm okay. I'm actually willing to go forward with it as is, although if the maker of the motion desires to add a second stipulation that that there be adequate parking remaining at the alternate lot to meet the requirements of the current use, that could potentially also address the concern, pending staff determining that.
I'm amenable to a friendly amendment saying that our second stimulation would be subject to calculation by planning staff that the lot at Citizens Bank still has adequate parking.
Does the second?
Yep, that's a valid concern.
Okay, Mr. Neese.
Yeah, I'm willing for that stipulation, but I do want to point out for the record that the property card shows this building has 30,000 feet of square of gross floor area and 16,000 feet of living area. I don't know what the combination is because it's not all bank, so there's probably,
Living area there?
I thought someone said there were apartments in this building.
Citizens Bank?
Not at the
Okay,
bank.
okay,
Not-
then it's
yeah,
not.
No, it's a bank.
So it seems like it's larger than a 10,000 square foot building, so, but I think the stipulation is a good one.
Yeah, I believe, and I would stand corrected by staff, but there's a gross square area and then there's the fit out. And I believe that the parking calculation is made by the fit out, by the usable square area, not the gross square area, correct?
I'm sorry, but you can't talk to us anymore.
I just had a point of order to,
No, I'm sorry. So is the motion set, and is there further discussion?
I'll just say I am in support of the approval with the two stipulations.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
Because we added a stipulation, it doesn't matter if the applicant is amenable to that, or basically, if they're not, then they can't do it. Okay.
They would have to come back before the board.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good question. Okay, Van, we are voting. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
No.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
thank you very much.
Okay. Do you smoke?
I was leaning back, too.
Are you guys still in pain? Okay, so for the next item, Mr. Rayum is recused. And this record will continue voting with us. Okay. The next item is the request of Martin Husledge, owner, for property located at 48 Langdon Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing dwelling and accessory structure, subdivide the property from one lot into two, and to construct a single-family structure with attached accessory dwelling unit on one lot and a two-family attached dwelling on the second lot. The project requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.521 to allow 2,832 square feet per dwelling unit for the proposed two-family dwelling lot where 3,500 square feet per dwelling unit is required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 138, Lot 47, and lies within the General Residence C District. Is there anyone to speak to this petition?
Oh, that would be me, sorry. I lost one of my people, I was just trying to find them. Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I'm Tim Phoenix from Hopeful Phoenix, Gormley and Roberts, here tonight with and on behalf of Martin Husledge, who's behind me, and I almost lost Corey Caldwell from TF Moran, who has done the plans that you see before you. Before launching into the numbers and the nature of the ask and variance, I just want to say that I've worked with Mr. Hustler, the team has worked with him, I'd say well over a year, trying to get this application as tight as we can under the circumstances. It's gone through many iterations trying to balance his goals with the ordinance, particularly given the size of the lot, the size of other lots around it, and the proximity of the existing building and parking to McDonough and Langdon Streets. So, personally, I give him credit for that, and I hope you will as well. What we have at 48 Langdon, which Steph has existing conditions before you, is a 9,927 square foot lot. It's got 78.5 feet of frontage on McDonough and 124.65 feet on Langdon Street. Right now, it has a two-family home and a shed or makeshift garage. There are two curb cuts, one on either side of the dwelling. And what he plans to do, and leave it there for the moment, Steph, is remove that in favor of a two-lot subdivision with a single-family home with an ADU on one lot. That's the one that needs the relief. That's the one that does not need the relief, and a duplex on the other lot. Again, by the numbers, we've got a 9,927 square foot lot. To do three dwelling units on a lot, per dwelling unit, you need 3,500 square feet. So we would need 10,500 square feet. We've got 9,927 of that, which is 94.5% of the total that we need for 3 units. Now, you might ask yourself, as I did as recently as this evening, we've got one lot, the one with 2 dwelling units, at 5,664 square feet, and the other lot that doesn't need this relief at 4,284 square feet. You might ask, well, why didn't we give that 700 or 800 square feet to the other lot to get closer to the number? And the reason is because of the size of the lot, the location, its location, and its proximity of any building to the corner of McDonough and Langdon Streets. When you try to keep the driveway away from that corner to make it safer, you have to move the building over, which you lose the ability to get your side setbacks, et cetera. So through the efforts of Mr. Hustledge and his technical team, he came up with what we believe is the optimal size given the overall numbers. Referring to this lot and the existing conditions, several things you should be aware of. The existing structure is roughly 1 feet, maybe less than that, from the front lot line. There are 2 driveway curb cuts on one lot today. The right-hand drive is very close, maybe 5 or 6 feet from the lot line along McDonough Street. So therefore, it's very close to that intersection of those 2 streets. The deck and the steps in the back encroach into the rear setback. The garage or shed encroaches significantly. It's almost on the left side lot line. If you would go, Steph, real quickly to Exhibit 4, the street view of the photographs. Keep going. One more.
Exhibit 4?
Yeah, but it's the second page of 4.
Oh, yep.
So here's a photograph of the lot, and you can see that poor condition shed or garage on the left. The house itself is not in great condition. You can see the gravel driveway. It's a bit overgrown. The main house needs some work. I don't know if there's one more photo or not, Steph. Yeah, there's the other side that shows that driveway. It's close to the intersection. You can see the fence that's there, that it's in poor condition. So overall, the main house is in average to below average condition. The rest of the features on the lot are in below average condition. If you would now go to the Exhibit 2, our proposed conditions. Thank you, Steph. So here are the 2 lots with A and B. A is the larger lot, but has 2 dwelling units with 2,832 square feet of area per dwelling unit, which that in of itself is about 81% of the required 3,500. Some features on this that in comparison to the existing conditions. It's now front yard setback compliant. It's got 1 curb cut per lot. All 4 side setbacks are met. Both are lot coverage compliant, both are open space compliant, both are height compliant, and both are frontage compliant. If you would, Steph, if you would go to the Exhibit 5, which is the tax map. So you can see the lot in question highlighted in green at sort of the lower to center left side. And I'm going to make a couple of remarks about the area in general and specifically the lots on this particular tax map. I did some math or counting today, and I count 62 lots on this tax map, the ones in yellow. And I'm ignoring the ones that are small lots that are in gray, but just on this particular tax map, of those 62, I counted 28 that are less than or equal to 3,500 square feet. And that's the lot itself. That's not even an analysis of whether there are duplexes or multi-units, et cetera. So 45, a little bit more than 45% of the lots on that tax map do not meet the lot area requirement in the first place, much less the lot area per dwelling unit. I also counted the number of lots that are less than or equal to 0.065 or 2,832 square feet. And if my count is correct, there's 23 of those, which is 33.8% of the lot. So but between those two, it's between almost 34 and over 45% of the lots in that zone and in that area, I believe they're all in that zone, do not meet one or the other of lot size or lot size per dwelling unit. Our memorandum identifies on page 3 a number, just sort of lots that are fairly close. We've got 28 Langdon Street, which is 1,219 square feet per dwelling unit. 21 to 23 is 1,829. 37 is 2003. 28 McDonough is 675 feet. It's 4 units on 2,700. 47 Langdon is 1 unit. It's on 39, so it does meet the 35, but it's pretty close. And 25 Langdon Street has 1 unit on and 1,742 square feet. So again, that's drilling down a little bit into the nearest, some of the nearer lots that compare very, very favorably with the lots, with what we are doing. And as I said, if you look at the gray area, those don't have the lot sizes on them, at least lot sizes according to the city map. But you can see there are a number of very small lots. So if you expand the area, again, we are meeting or in league with or very close to or fit in well with, I guess I should say, the number of units per lot area. I'll turn to the requirements for the variance. Again, with all of that said, we only need the one variance, which is the duplex on a 5,664 square foot lot, which is 2,832 square feet per dwelling unit. The first two variance requirements, which most of us practitioners do, are considered together. The variances are not contrary to the public interest, and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. And the test there, under the Malachi Glen case that I typically cite, is will granting the variance unduly and to a marked degree conflict with the ordinance such that it violates the ordinance's basic zoning objectives. Mere conflict is not enough. So then, and I won't belabor it, I usually go through and I have here the requirements of the ordinance, its purposes, including the use of land, buildings, and structures for business, residential, and other purposes. And we're saying it's overall, there are some fairly large lots in the area, but most of them are quite small. And we're taking a relatively oversized lot, creating 2 lots, which conform to the requirements. They're each more than 3,500 square feet. And the lot area per dwelling unit fits in very well with the area. It will also allow relatively, if you will, more economical rentals or sales, or if somebody's to buy them, than would a single-family home on a lot. So it opens the door to a little bit more residences at a little bit better price point, whether it's rent or sale, than otherwise would be found. Then is the intensity of land use. Again, I won't belabor that. I've mentioned it. The impacts of outdoor lighting, noise, vibration, stormwater runoff, and flooding. We meet all of the requirements, including coverage and including open space. So those will be improved, as will, generally speaking, air and light by opening up that back area a little bit and opening up that left side, taking that old garage or shed down. Preservation and enhancement of the visual environment. You saw the photograph, what it looks like today. Steph went by, because I didn't ask her to stop, the elevations of these. I think you'll agree that they're very tastefully done and they will fit in well. Preservation of historic districts doesn't apply. The use and protection of natural resources, again, we're going to improve. Overall, those two first requirements, the Supreme Court found, will the variance alter the essential character of the locality? And this locality, given the number of lots and/or lots themselves or lot area per dwelling units that don't meet the requirement, this fits in perfectly. Or will it threaten the public health, safety, and welfare? The answer to that is clearly no, as we will be taking an aged structure or structures, beautifying the entire lot, building fully two-code homes, code-compliant homes that need only this relatively slight variance. The third of the 5 requirements is that substantial justice will be done, and the test is if there's no benefit to the public that would outweigh the hardship to the applicant, this factor is satisfied. Any loss to the applicant not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. Because these are permitted use, because we fit in well with the neighborhood in terms of lot size and lot area per dwelling unit, thus we are consistent with the area, we will be increasing housing stock by only a little, but we still are increasing it. There's no benefit to the general public from denying this variance. Yet, if you do deny it, Mr. Husledge will suffer harm because he can't improve the lot as he desires, and the public will suffer from a lost opportunity for more housing. And this is particularly stressed knowing what the lot sizes and many of the lot area per dwelling units are in the immediate area. Number 4, granting the variance will not diminish surrounding property values. I often weigh, should I bring in an expert, a realtor, or should I bring in an appraiser? Usually, and in this case, I believe it's a common sense test for the reasons I've stated. This project is going to improve that property, improve taxes for the city, fits in well with the area, and therefore is not going to diminish property values. And then finally is the hardship, 3-pronged test, special conditions, distinguish the properties from others in the area. Broken down into 2 lots, it's very consistent. As one lot, it's relatively large compared to many of the lots in the area. There are some very large lots, but a large percentage of them are very small lots. So we believe that those facts, plus there's some case law, it's not great, but there's case law, Walker v. Manchester, that I didn't put in here that I sometimes cite, where somebody wanted to turn one of the giant Manchester mansions into a home and a funeral home. And in dicta, the court found that, well, there's a number of others that's already happened. So since it's already happened with similar circumstances, it's okay here. And I argue that that's the same thing we have here, where the change fits in very well with the neighborhood. Second prong is that there's no fair and substantial relationship between the public purposes of the ordinance and its application here. So why do we have density requirements? To prevent overcrowding, to ensure adequate air, light, space, separation between neighbors, sight lines, and the like. All of those are improved, and we are at 95% on the whole of the 2 lots together. We're on 95% of, approximately 95% of the amount of area we would need to have three units by right. So we think that with the improvements that we're doing with removing things from very close to the lot line, removing encroachments in the rear and the left side, and compliance with all of the other dimensional requirements, there's just no reason to apply that difference now. The 3,500 is somewhat arbitrary. I'm slightly surprised that that's the number, given that there's so many lots that are smaller in that area, but that's what we have to live with. The third and final prong is that the proposed use is reasonable. It's a residential use in a residential zone, therefore the use itself is reasonable, and for the reasons I've stated, we strongly believe that the request for the variance is reasonable and should be granted. I'll close with one last comment. As of today, we obtain a copy of an opposition submission by a Tom Waterman, who lives at 43 Cornwall Street. You've probably gotten it and read it. We just got it this afternoon. I think it was submitted maybe yesterday. It looks like yesterday. My only comment really is that we think that the points that the gentleman makes, Tom and Patty Waterman, are inapplicable here. I would also point out that the plans show that 43 Cornwall Street is directly behind this property. And I asked Monica Kaiser, who you know, she's an associate in my firm, to check, and that is a 6-unit building on a 0.193 acre lot. And if I did my math right, that translates to 1,401 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. So we're certainly better with this proposal than, again, I'm no mathematician here, but if my math was right, we are better than the abutter that's complaining about this. And we also think he's better off with this because it's going to improve the look and therefore the value, and it gets these encroachments, some of which are relatively close to the building that he lives in. That's all I have, unless you have questions for me, Martin, or Corey.
Other questions? Yes, Mr. Neese.
Yeah, I have several. I have a comment. You showed us on page 116 of our package, you showed us some properties that you highlighted in yellow, and you added all those up, and you said you thought those were all in the same zone. They are not all in the same zone.
Yeah,
I just want to point that out for the record. The properties along Islington Street are not in that, and then some of the properties, properties to the east of, I think, Rock Street are not in that same zone. I don't know how that affects your numbers, but it does affect them.
Good point, and I didn't mean to mislead anyone. I only figured this out today to raise this issue, and I did not. My point was more the general area. I do see that the lots along Islington Street, most of those are much larger than this
Right,
lot,
I
and
know
the ones I
just
mean.
want to make clear that what you said was not
Very,
accurate.
very, very apt.
Okay. On page 98 of your packet, you've got a list of properties nearby. I think most of them are on the same street. I think they're all on Langdon. And
I'm looking at that.
many of them do not, many of them exceed the residential unit to lot area requirement. I understand that. But I guess, you referenced Walker versus City of Manchester. In that case, one of the reasons the Supreme Court ruled is that a number of variances have been given in the same area. Do you know how many of these properties have been given variances, or did these precede the zoning ordinance?
I do not know. I
non-conforming?
would venture that many, if not most, the lots and the buildings on them preceded zoning. But my point was not that there were granted variances, but my point is that it fits in with the area as it exists today.
Well, my point is that I'm not convinced that your case citation is completely relevant because of the language in that case. That's why I brought it up. And the other thing is that, in your letter, I think you cite these other properties. How do you reconcile your comment about the surrounding properties with the zoning ordinance section 10.233.50, which says whether surrounding properties violate a provision or standard shall not be a factor in determining whether spirit of the ordinance would be observed?
I address that by saying that I think that section is overstated. I think that you can and should give consideration to whether the property fits in with what's around it, and that's my point, is that it fits in with the size of other properties around it, and on the cases we've mentioned, the density of a handful of those properties.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mattson?
Yeah, did you consider, I understand why you're trying to subdivide, but did you consider subdividing and then having 2 single-family homes, each with an ADU, so that no variance would be required?
Mr. Husledge did consider that, but he would prefer to have both the value and the size, if you will, of the duplex for his own purposes, and whether he keeps them, rents them, or sells them. So this was the decision he made, and We all together did the analysis, and for the reasons I've stated, we think this fits, and that's really what it boils down to is, does it fit in with this neighborhood under the constraints of the zoning ordinance, and we believe it does as presented.
Ms.
Do you have a
Murchison?
question?
No, I'm just,
So following up on that, on Mr. Mattson's point, it's not a matter of whether or not it fits in. It is whether or not there are special conditions of that land that really merit a variance from the application of the ordinance to the land. I want to give you another shot at what is your hardship for not putting a single family on Lot A with perhaps an ADU?
The hardship is that as the lot exists today, it's relatively large compared to many, and if you take out the ones on Islington Street, probably most of the lots that are nearby it. So the fact that it's a large lot, which will allow this division of the lot, which is very, very close, 90 some odd percent of the total area, and 80 some odd percent of the area for the duplex. When you factor in all of the other requirements of the variance, we believe it meets the hardship test because it's a larger lot. It makes sense to divide it. And I know the argument I'm going to get is things we've done in the past don't count because there's no precedent, but I have been before this board on numerous occasions and gotten, rightly so in my opinion, not too dissimilar from this, variances to split up lots to create, when one's not quite big enough for two, but is much bigger than you need for one. So we thought it was a worthwhile effort to proceed, and with respect, none of your questions have changed my view on that.
that's not surprising.
All right. So I went through this area. It seems that there's only one other house on the street. It's also a duplex that is a tear down. They're all of the houses are, seem to be of the same age. You talk about the conditions of the property being, difficult. The driveway, some of just the conditions of the property being not workable. Can you kind of go through that again? Because it seems that everything that you mentioned when we were looking at the street, the pictures of the street, it seems that those are all things that can be pretty easily addressed.
I'm not sure I follow the question. Can you?
Sir, go ahead.
Is this about when you talked about moving the A, changing Lot A, so that B would be more compliant?
Yeah,
Is that what you're
and
asking
I'll ask
about?
Corey and/or Martin to jump in if they want to embellish what I have to say. But I wasn't in every meeting that Martin had with his technical or design team, but I was in several over the period I described. But what we are trying to do is balance the fact that we're at a corner where there's traffic, a fair amount of traffic. The existing driveway is very close to that corner, and if we move the home so that the line is better, then we start getting into need for sideline setbacks.
That's right.
Yes. So again, we tried to just to balance it, but I think the point to take from it is on a lot that's 9,900 and some odd square feet. We're 95%, roughly 94 something, of the way of what we need on an overall. And so changing it so one of those lots is a little bit smaller so you don't have quite the percentage, that 95%, you have roughly 80%, a little more. On the whole basis, it's pretty darn close. And it seems to me improper or to deny Mr. Husledge on the technicality that you didn't quite meet 3,500.
I don't think it's a technicality. It is the Lot A variance request is being driven by the fact that it's a duplex on that lot. It has nothing to do with the subdivision. And I also just would note a statement that the 3,500, let me just make sure I say this right. the 3,500 minimum is not arbitrary. That is what the zoning ordinance has set forth, and that is what we all have to work within, so.
Well, what I meant by that, I don't mean your application is arbitrary, but when somebody decided 3,500, it could have been 3,499 or 3,550. You know, and I don't quarrel with the decision, but what I'm saying, the point I'm trying to make is that just because it's 3,500 doesn't mean that you can't reasonably approve something less than that under all of the circumstances that we're arguing here, which include more housing stock, somebody to live in a duplex rather than an ADU, so a family could live there more likely than a couple or somebody retired, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, Ms. Janice.
Yeah, I'm still struggling a little bit with an issue that Ms. Marchison brought up, which is the hardship requirement. Now, it's my understanding that, in essence, you're creating the hardship by splitting it into 2 lots. You're saying that you're creating a special condition by creating a lot that's too small for a duplex, and then trying to make the argument that that special condition of the existing property is what justifies it. So I'm struggling a little bit to wrap my head around that
And I
logic.
appreciate you giving me the opportunity more than once to address your questions. It's a little bit esoteric, I grant you, but the point I'm trying to make, and apparently not that successfully thus far, is that hardship is not just because you have a lot that's too small. Hardship can be because you have a lot that's too big. And I think, and my position, our position is that this lot is larger than many of those other, and when you propose what we've proposed, the lot area and the lot area per dwelling unit fit in with this neighborhood and will not be out of place. So I believe those factors combine to create hardships. And as I've said, I've been before this board and gotten lot area and lot size per dwelling unit on other occasions, not exactly the same, and I don't expect you to say yes to this just because you've said yes to that, but I've seen this board go along with it and have that understanding and look at the larger picture and not, whittle down onto one specific thing, because I think you have to look at the whole thing as a whole.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition?
Just one point to add, Madam Chair. When we looked at the balancing test of
Please
this,
introduce yourself.
Corey Caldwell, TF Moran, I prepared the plans before you. When we looked at the balance test for this application, we looked at a lot with 5 existing nonconformities. The building is in the front yard setback, the deck and stairs are in the rear yard setback, the garage is in the left side setback, the lot has 2 driveways where one is allowed, and the second driveway on the lot is too close to the intersection of Langdon and McDonough. So we looked at this as removing 5 nonconformities in exchange for 1, and we are able, in doing so, to preserve more open space for the 2 lots than we are for the 1 lot existing today. So the balance that we concluded with, we're eliminating 5 nonconformities, we're improving open space, and we're just a little bit short of the lot area. And when we balanced that, we felt that was better, not only for the lot, but for the neighborhood. It's a better, it's much more, the intersection works better because the obstruction isn't blocked by cars parked in the driveway. The side yard, rear yard, and front yards are preserved with green space, which don't exist today. So it's a much more open feel, if you would, with 2 lots than it is with that 1 existing lot with 5 nonconformities. Just wanted to share our thoughts as we designed this plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else to speak in favor? Is there anyone to speak in opposition?
Hi, I'm Tom Waterman. I live at 43 Cornwall Street. It seems like I've heard the rebuttal to my my statement already, so I'll try to add some new information to my letter that I sent to the board. I've been a direct abutter to 48 Langdon for 11 years now. The property is a large rectangular lot. I've always known it's going to be developed. I've looked at it at the backyard, and yes, it'll be developed. It's too big. Down the street towards the railroad tracks on Langdon, there was a large lot. They subdivided that into 3 separate lots and put up single-family houses. They look great, they look beautiful. I thought to myself, that's what's going to happen next door. They're going to cut the lot in half, put in 2 single-family houses. It'll blend right in. And it'll be a nice flow. The plan to demolish existing 2-family house and create 4 dwelling units by a subdivision variance seems excessive. This level of density exceeds what the GRC zoning district was designed for. And if the goal is to have more rental income, I think other people have already mentioned this, why not just do another single-family house with an ADU? You can have 4 rental units. Alternately, I don't know if this, I believe it would be a special exemption. You could request a variance to add an ADU to an existing rebuilt duplex on the same property without subdividing. In 2019, this board heard a similar case at 41 Salem Street. For just explain, Salem Street is 4 streets to the west of Langdon, just another perpendicular street between Islington and McDonough. And they tried to fit 2 large duplexes on that large piece of property. And after going back and forth, it was shot down, and now they have 3 single-family homes there. That was in 2019. So in the variance for that, they were asking for is 2,700 square feet per unit, and I got shot down. So I don't feel the applicant has demonstrated a hardship asking for a 19% less than required lot size. The zoning ordinance intent is to preserve livability and balance the neighborhood, which this proposal does not achieve. I urge the board to consider the precedent at 41 Salem Street, the applicant's zoning compliant alternatives, and the impact the development would have on the neighborhood's character. Denying this variance would uphold the intent of the ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who wants to speak to, for, or against?
The gentleman was right. I've already rebutted most of that, so I'm just going to be very brief. One, he compares this to 41 Salem Street. Well, this is not 2 large duplexes, so it's completely different. And the other thing is that, and again, pardon me because I'm repeating, we're removing current violations that are in poor condition and are in some respects closer to his home. And again, reiterating, it's a little difficult with somebody in a 6 unit with 1,400 square feet per dwelling unit complaining about this given the neighborhood. That's it. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak to, for, or against? Public hearing is closed. I'm struggling with this. I feel like I can kind of buy the, we're only missing it, you know, we're compliant 94.5%, which I think is an odd way of looking at it, but I can almost buy it. And while the dwelling unit number is off, the building itself fits on the lot. It is not overcrowding the lot. But I'm also persuaded by Mr. Neese's argument that you created the subdivision, and now you're asking us to forgive you for making it somewhat unbuildable. So I feel like I am torn, and I am ready to listen to more comments.
I'll weigh in because I'm not torn. The applicant has clearly created the hardship for this board. They could have drawn the lot line and had plenty of room with no variance for a 2-family on one lot and a single family on the other lot, and all the other things that they were saying they would clean up, you know, setback issues, so on and so forth, would all have been taken care of by that. But no, the applicant has decided, and he keeps on switching from 80% compliance to 94. Well, you're splitting the lots, so you don't get the full lot anymore. It's 80. Sorry. But I don't see the hardship for this application at all. Because clearly there's enough room to split the lot and put a single-family home on one and a duplex on the other. I think they're trying to backdoor a four-family by throwing in an ADU. And that's why they are playing with the lot lines. But that's where I feel.
Okay. And, yes.
Is it permissible to ask Mr. Mantle a question?
Yes.
Sure.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to do the math in my head where you said it could be split to have a duplex on one lot that has 7,000 square feet. And that only leaves 2927, right, for the other one, which would be small, for a one. Right, so they'd still need a variance if I'm
For a
doing the math
single-family
right,
home.
for a single-family home.
Right.
And they would still need a variance for an ADU as well.
But if I understood your comment, you were saying that there was enough room to do that without a variance, but I don't think there is.
No, I was saying that where they put the lot line created the necessary hardship for the two-family.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah, I guess I'm slightly torn too. So basically, for me, I have no problem with subdividing this. It can totally be subdivided, but the issue created upon subdivision is then trying to put the two units on. And as the chair has already mentioned, it's not a huge ask, but it is being created as part of this. And then I guess the most convincing thing I found is this, removing 5 nonconformities for one. But again, if you're starting fresh, why create a nonconformity?
Anybody else, or a motion, perhaps? Ms. Mantle. Ms. Mantle, oh my goodness, Beth.
I will, trying to read the temperature of the board here. I will move to deny the application as presented and advertised. If I have a second.
Second.
So I think there's, I think this is fairly straightforward. I think that the applicant is subdividing a lot that is oversized for this district. However, the reality is that they have not demonstrated hardship, and I will go through the criteria and just explain why. So I think that it fails on the hardship criteria. 10.233.25, little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance will result in an unnecessary hardship. A, the property has special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area, and owing to these special conditions, a fair and substantial relationship does not exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. And here the lot area is 3,500 square feet minimum. The applicant would not need a variance if he built a single-family home on Lot A. I understand the reasons why. I absolutely do. But the reality is the purview of this board is to see whether or not there is a hardship. Despite a good effort by Attorney Phoenix, the applicant did not demonstrate that they could not go ahead and build a single-family home on Lot A, and therefore would not need a variance from the lot area. For those reasons, I believe that this application should be denied.
Does the second have anything to add?
No, it's good enough.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Metz.
Yeah, I just wanted to draw particular attention to, for the hardship criteria, it's special conditions that distinguish this property from others in the area, not that it's similar to other properties in the area.
Okay, thank you.
Did I misstate that?
No, you said it correctly. It's just that the applicant had presented it as justification for the hardship is that there's others in the neighborhood just like it.
Yes.
Right,
Correct.
right.
Thank you, good point.
It is a good point. Yes, Mr. Neese.
So I struggle with this one, and the main reason I struggle is I find it easy to address several of the criteria. But the last one, the hardship criteria, is the one that I struggle with. And part of the reason I struggle with it is that in the applicant's presentation, many of the special conditions he talks about are resolved by splitting into two properties. He refers to the location of driveways as being a special condition of the property. As soon as he splits it in half, these are really gone. So I'm looking at the lot for property A, trying to figure out what is the special condition that means that that justified the variance that he's requested. The only thing I can come up with is that that property is slightly smaller than what's required under our ordinance for a duplex, for two residences. And that's not really significantly different than any other property in the area.
Any further discussion? Okay. So a yes vote denies the request. Ms. Record?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
That was unanimous?
Yeah, I'm surprised.
And I would like to thank you for really making some things quite clear to me that I had not thought of in that way, and sometimes that just happens. Yes, thank you. So here we are. This might be almost a record.
Wow, 9 o'clock. Motion to adjourn?
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I will not see you next